Thank you, everyone, for joining. Very excited about our first Developer Productivity Engineering Lowdown event. I'm Ruse from Gradle, and we have Justin, also from the Gradle team here, and we're chatting today with Danny Thomas from the Netflix Engineering Productivity team, and very happy to have him here. And before we get started, so why are we here? For us here at the Gradle team, we're sponsoring this event. Productivity engineering has been a new way of doing things, and we've been heavily promoting developer productivity engineering. Excited we are about this and want the whole world to think in terms of being proactive as far as making your developers more productive. We started this event called Dev Prod Eng Showdown to make it more fun and whatnot. That's a different event. And today we started the first Dev Prod Eng Lowdown to give you the lowdown of go deeper into how certain organizations do productivity engineering. So we have Danny from Netflix here, and we're doing a session with Microsoft and LinkedIn in the upcoming weeks. Danny, as far as your history and whatnot go, you and I know each other for a while. I mean, I first met you at before the Gradle Summit. I think we had met at the Netflix offices a few times, and our favorite memories are when you had to take over a talk at the Gradle Summit for John Schneider with 1 day advance notice on dependency management, may I say, which is not something that you can easily wing, right? So thanks for doing this today, and I guess we'll jump in. For you, you've been in the whole Netflix productivity engineering thing. As far as what you've seen in the industry today and your experience in this industry for so many years, when do you think is a good time to start looking at developer productivity engineering and maybe even start thinking about starting a team around this problem?
Yeah, I mean, as essentially, the thing is, you already have productivity engineers. You just might not be calling them that, right? So you probably have developer infrastructure engineers already. You probably have folks that help with deployments if you do that kind of thing, and you certainly have people on your teams that spend a significant amount of time on the build, on CI, on deployment, on making development more productive, because that's what they care about and that's their passion, right? And so really productivity engineering is recognizing that, like, the importance of not splitting those responsibilities again across your entire organization, having lots of engineers not have it be their job, and ensure that it's somebody who's on the hook for ensuring the productivity of the team, and their one output is like to grease the wheel, right? And to really to make sure that most engineers can just put their heads down and get the work that the business needs done.
And I remember Netflix was one of the first organizations. I remember that day that Mike McGarr came and gave me a business card, and it said productivity engineering on it. And I don't know when that was, how many years back that was, but that was the first time I had actually seen a productivity engineering organization, right? That, like, hey, this is how it's. How did that come about at Netflix? You were there. What's the history there?
It was 2016, I think. So Mike, and we were followers. If I remember correctly, we were followers in that regard. I'm sure that we had talked to others, and I can't remember who, that or had already called themselves developer productivity. But to be clear, like, this already existed at Netflix. So and for many years, so we already had a shared team model, and the team I joined at the time was called Engineering Tools, and we were part of operations engineering. And at that point, we understood and talked frequently about, like, that we were force multipliers. Like, our job was there to take care of developing, filtering infrastructure and aspects of the software development lifecycle. So other engineers at Netflix didn't have to. So even then, you could argue we were productivity engineering the whole time. But yeah, the recognizing it as as a concept and as a name, yeah, I think 2016 or so. And we actually dropped we dropped that name at some point and came back again. We're engineering tools and services for a short time there, and now we're back at productivity engineering after a reorg. So yeah, it's been some time.
And for us, we being at Gradle, right, we talk to folks responsible for the builds, and we always want to tell them, hey, we want you to be the developer productivity engineering team and think about things differently and think and approach them from a data-driven way and not be, reactive and be proactive, right? And I think that's and that's why I wanted to kind of bring you here today, Danny, to tell the whole world, like, hey, it's no secret that Netflix ships software at scale really well, way, way above average of what's happening in the world. And so what does it take? Tell us about your productivity engineering structure. How many people are in there, right? How is it organized? What does it take? It's not 2 or 3 people, right?
No, it's not. So productivity engineering is part of platform engineering, and arguably you could call platform engineering, you could call it all productivity engineering, because we're a collection of shared teams that provide a whole bunch of shared cloud network productivity engineering, all kinds of functions. So platform is nearly 400 engineers. And I should say Netflix around 2,000 engineers right now. So to give you an idea of sort of the ratio of platform to the rest of engineering. Then developer productivity itself is about 130 total, not just engineers, like the whole team, including managers and TPMs, etc. And then developer productivity is split into 3 domains. So we have the develop domain, which is what I work in, and so that's everything in the local development loop, bootstrap development, test, everything up until you push code. Pretty much a little bit of an overlap with delivery, but that's our domain. Then there is delivery, so they're the folks that do continuous integration and continuous delivery. And then operate, which is metrics, telemetry, logging, everything you need once your service is up and running and you're keeping the lights on. So then I won't go too. And so just to talk briefly about sort of the products in the other domains, and I'll talk a bit more about develop. So delivery is CI, mostly Jenkins, but with quite a bit of custom stuff running on top to make it work for us. And Spinnaker, which folks would be familiar with. It really has been one of the most incredible things when I joined Netflix was the ease of deployments. So those folks have done some incredible work over the years. Operate is like metrics and alerting and that kind of thing. There's almost nothing there you would recognize from industry. It's all pretty much bespoke to Netflix's needs. And then in develop, we have some language teams. So we have Java and JavaScript as our 2 major supported languages, and so we have complete teams for that, doing framework, integration, build, that kind of work for those languages. But that would leave other languages and other technology out in the cold. So we have a polyglot team which help with both our workflow tooling, our container experience, and just providing the glue that means that if you're not on one of our primary supported languages, that you're not left out in the cold, right? So you still have a way to integrate with the rest of the tooling we provide. Finally, what else have we got in develop? I should have made a note of this.
It's big. It's a big org.
It's big, yeah.
It's a big org.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to recap, you got around 120 just in productivity engineering, and then you got another 300 in platform engineering, all support. So you got around 420 engineers supporting 2,000 engineers at Netflix, which is pretty awesome, right? That ratio is, and that's what it takes, folks, right? And there is no magic happening. It's a lot of hard work and tooling and whatnot, right? So thanks for sharing that, Danny. So
Yeah.
what do you, as far as productivity engineering goes, right? And I know with all these many people in different orgs, they have different goals, KPIs, and success metrics. What are some of the interesting ones that you could share today that are like, hey, as a team, we want to hit these numbers, right?
Yeah.
And I would say, let's start with, what do you care about? And what does upper management care about, right? As sometimes they may be different, or are they the same? Actually, it's a good question.
No, we tend to be pretty aligned. So one of the things that we started doing a year ago when we reorganized into that develop, operate, and deliver structure was we introduced product management to all the platform. And so one of the big things that we did is we went out and as the product folks went out, and management folks I should say, went out and interviewed engineers and spent an incredible amount of time understanding the current landscape of productivity. What works well, what is frictionful, and what what makes it great to work at Netflix as an engineer, and what could be better. And so now a very large proportion of our roadmap is focused on top problems identified through that process. So and it's really useful on many levels. So on one hand, it's like, well, this is a mandate, right? We went out and we talked to you and we gathered our ideas, we worked on our solutions, we came back to you and said, hey, do you think this will fit the bill? Will this address your concerns? And they say yes, we get sign off. And it means that because to your point sort of about size, we actually run pretty lean. Like, it might seem like a lot, but when you drill down to an individual team, say my team is the JVM ecosystem team, there is 4 of us, and there's 4 of us to about 900 Java engineers. So when you actually drill to an individual team, where we can be quite resource constrained, so we do need to be really deliberate about where we spend our time. And so that process was really useful about deciding what we do and what we don't do. But the other thing is also standardizing on OKRs and KPIs for those deliverables. And so our first KPI for the develop domain is developer wait time. It's really difficult to measure developer productivity sort of in more abstract terms, because everyone kind of floats to their level of productivity. And actually, it's fascinating. If you sit with an engineer and say, hey, show me your commit to production workflow, it is staggering how tolerant engineers are of toil and frustration and friction. And so often when you interview folks, they're like, oh no, this seems fine. And you actually look at it, it's like, oh man, like we can do so much better. It's like they're actually wasting quite a bit of time. So yeah, that developer wait time is sort of just a proxy for every time a tool that we control, whether it's compilation test, syncing IntelliJ, dependency, whatever it is. Every time a developer is waiting for that kind of thing, we want to try and make that wait as short as possible, so they can stay in the flow and stay focused on the work they're doing, rather than be distracted by a compilation or a project configuration that takes minutes or whatever it might be.
Oh, that's super cool. Thanks for sharing that. So number one thing when you talk to these folks that came out was, how do you improve developer wait time? That was the main thing. Was there anything?
That was the take. Well, we looked at the themes and we worked out that's something we could measure quite easily, because our existing tooling has the telemetry to allow us to measure that, and it's also something that we can measure improvement. Right? We don't have to go out and talk to people again. We will to say, hey, like, is the experience better, like subjectively, but like it means that we can track these things as metrics we can measure, and so we can see a marked improvement over time. Yeah,
that makes sense. And that's a great segue to my next question, right? What tools do you use and what data do you collect, right? So you definitely need some tooling in this space, right?
Yeah.
From Gradle folks, right? But it's hard to do, right? And there's a lot of data there. So let's start with what tools do you guys use, and what are the ones that have been successful, and then we can go into the data part.
Yeah. So we're really deliberate about build versus buy for those results reasons, right? It's not a good use of our time to be building tools and products that aren't really differentiated to Netflix, and developer tooling is not like, while it's my teams and developer productivity's core mission, like that's not Netflix's business, right? And there is no matter how well we hire, there is no way we can ever come close to a vendor who is engaged with solving that one problem. Whether that's you guys at Gradle, or folks at SourceGraph, or Stack Overflow, or Atlassian products, or you name it. Like we use pretty much everything JetBrains IDEs. Like you'd be like, if you came to work at Netflix, you'd be really familiar with just about everything we use in terms of the core developer experience when you're actually doing work on your computer. It looks very much like, as much as possible, like we did this on purpose, like an OSS development experience, because it means that when people come in, they're not having to learn a whole bunch of custom Netflix tooling, and their skills are transferable. So it's, we try to keep close to stock Gradle. We have Nebula, which is the Netflix build language, which builds on top of Gradle and has a bunch of our own opinions. But we try to keep the experience as much as possible, stock OSS. Same for IntelliJ, same for, we've been really deliberate about not abstracting away that experience, because it turned out that, that would have been harmful in the long term. And then in terms of data, it depends on the tool. Gradle, of course, is Gradle Enterprise. We use the export API to send metrics via Keystone so we can run Spark queries for our data science folks to help us with those metrics. And other products, Elastic, we use Elastic actually pretty heavily for metrics too. It's just a really convenient way of sending runtime metrics for. We do that for Newt, our workflow toolkit, and for things like Spring Boot Netflix, so like startup time, and those kinds of runtime metrics, like version metrics, that kind of thing, so we can see adoption, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Got it. So, and we all know, right, you can't do productivity engineering without collecting data to see where the pains are and whatnot, right? Surveys help. A lot of folks are doing surveys out there. It just gets you so far. As far as the data you've been collecting that's been helpful, right? So we talked about build and test time and whatnot. What's been one thing that you're like, hey, this was collecting this type of data was, very instrumental in us, getting to meeting these KPIs and whatnot that we wanted to achieve?
I mean, the KPI stuff is kind of pretty straightforward. But the things that surprise us actually are that supporting our tools, we feel like we have a pretty good handle on, just a gut feeling, on, like, based on support requests and based on our, when we talk to other folks about how our tools are used and where. And when we do dig into those metrics, we're often surprised. Like it felt like, most engineers, only ran their builds from the IDE. Like most of the time when we're giving people support, it's like, oh, they're delegating to Gradle from the IDE, for instance. And we look into the data, and it turns out like half of all developer invoked builds are from the terminal, and that's not what we expected. And because we were over-indexing on the IDE experience and not focusing enough on the terminal experience.
That's super interesting. So you're saying it was like 50-50 command line?
Yeah, and I thought it was probably 80-20. Yeah, that would be my gut. It might have been my gut feeling. Like I would have always said, hey, most people run from the IDE. They don't drop to the terminal for this stuff. And it's like, that is not true.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's that the data helps it means that you're not running on, or you're not making decisions based on assumptions, and you're actually proving out an improvement. It also means that, like, when we do start a new piece of work that we think will impact productivity, we build a key result and something we can measure one way or the other, and actually prove that the work had the outcome we were looking for. So that's been incredibly useful.
And kind of circling a little bit back to the whole developer wait time KPI. Once you looked into the data, what are some of the things that you share that were holding folks up? I mean, in my mind, I could think of a few things, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. But yeah, I'd love to hear it from you, right?
We're still working on it, so we're still not quite there. But I can tell you, just on it, like, here we go. Here's an anecdote. So we know but we do know from our metrics that most engineer time is spent in tests, or most build time is spent in tests. And so our focus right now is doing what we can to improve test times, and for two reasons. So one is that it's great to have quick feedback from CI, but also long test times or demanding CPU or resource intensive tests cause engineers to want to push code to CI for verification, and it just takes them out of that local loop. And our hope is that by improving performance and parallelism and the speed of that feedback, we can have folks running tests locally as much as possible. So I know, talking to Luke, at Gradle, like, you guys have noticed this, right? Like, when you rolled out test distribution there, people ran tests locally more often, and that was our hope too, coming into that. So it's pretty exciting, actually.
And I'm sorry to put you on the spot with this one, but what kind of results have you seen or hope to see with that, as that folks running more tests locally, like this, especially with us, like, talking to folks in the Maven world, right? Once build times get so long, folks stop running tests locally, right? What's the result? What data have you guys seen, if any, of the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, so we're pretty early in our test distribution rollout. I would say, but for the projects that we've looked at, say for Nebula itself, and our internal plugins, those have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Gradle test cases, so they're quite heavy. Like, they take, you have to in a Gradle daemon, and the workspace setup is not insignificant. But for one project, we reduced the build time from 90 minutes to 5, just through the parallelization, and just launching all those tests from IntelliJ and having it delegate to Gradle and have the parallel results just stream in, and your CPU is nothing and is really something. We think that test distribution will really move the needle on that, and really improve the test experience for everyone. But we're pretty early days there.
And in theory, just in general, I mean, we say it all the time, like, hey, you get more test coverage, right? Better quality code, less flaky products, less flaky tests, right? A lot of folks are looking at PR failure rates, right, and decreasing those. And so it's too early for you guys to tell how that is trickling down to some of those. But do you have any data from just test coverage in the past and why that should be a best practice?
Yeah, I mean, testing is uneven. Like, it don't, and so it depends on the team. It depends on the project's history. Like, every team at Netflix is different. Like, there is engineering. While we align around certain principles, like, engineering is very, like, teams have their individual cultures and approach their work they're differently. But we do know, like, say from that top problem work, dependency management is pretty much what I've worked on for my nearly 7 years at Netflix, and that comes up time and time again. People talking about the pain they feel when dependency updates break, and so a library releases, it has a breaking change or it upgrades a transitive dependency, which causes a downstream breakage. And so the big focus for us now, right, is to try and reduce that and ensure that the library producers are getting feedback that this stuff is bad, and they can effectively gate based on downstream dependency update results. And a big part of that push will be testing. So because right now, like, those things will sail through a pull request because you might not catch the problem, and it gets merged, and it's on a stack, at least on a test stack before you realize there's a problem, which is way too late. That's having to dive into the logs on an instance is not an effective way of catching an issue that should have been caught in a pull request. So and so like test distribution, like we hope that it's sort of an engineering culture hack that encourages more tests to be run locally. Like we're hoping that providing the capabilities to catch these problems with dependency updates earlier will incentivize better tests, right? It's like you can really focus on the that broke us, I'm going to write a test for that, and that's going to improve our test coverage in the future on that component.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And one of my favorite questions that I can't been meaning to kind of ask you here is biggest productivity engineering wins in the last few years that you could share with the audience, right, as a result of having these teams and doing what you guys do. Or would love to hear one or more stories if we have time. Let's start with
so man, there's so much work that goes on. So one, I would say our stuff is at its best is when it's not just one thing, right? It's like when all of the things we do come together and enable a team to deliver something that's like business critical super quickly, and they're sort of relieved from having to make a whole bunch of decisions and be distracted from what they're trying to achieve by just the stuff they shouldn't need to worry about. So the most recent example of that would be gaming. So we've been talking a lot about what we're doing in gaming publicly recently. And so those folks stood up a new Edge API for gaming. So this is for the device communication with the API, using a lot of our stuff. So Spring Boot, Netflix, and the DGS, GraphQL abstractions and the like. And they stood up this thing in crazy time. And then that's a testament to them because they just worked crazy hard and did an amazing job. But also, it's really great when they came to talk to us in old hands, and we're like, hey, here are all the things we used from you guys that helped us get this done. So always room for improvement, but we're really, really gratified when that stuff comes together. I'd say personally, it has no correlation with how much work it was and how long it took me. I've had projects take 6, 12, 18 months, and they've been really they've been impactful and they've met their goals, but they're like nobody notices terribly. And then I'll bang something out in the afternoon, and everyone's like, "Wow, this is amazing!" And it's like, so you can never tell what will stick and what will really just be noticeable for folks, because, like I said, people have a pretty big tolerance for fast and slow, in both directions. So we always have to be mindful that that's the importance of measuring this stuff, because the problems can get pretty bad before you realize, oh wow, there's a lot of toil involved. I guess we can talk about experiences on that. That's next. So we just enabled Gradle build caching, for instance. That was a complete stealth launch. I turned it on. We did a stage rollout of that. We did a whole bunch of push-only testing, and we verified the stability of the cache artifacts without people noticing. And we've had 2 projects break because of caching. but nobody said, hey, my build is faster. They haven't noticed. And it's probably like 20 or 30% improvement. Like, but you know, we know where like we know where they're waiting less time for their builds. I guess, like, and I mean the other nice thing about the way we do developer productivity is like we don't really differentiate. It's like we hire for engineers the same way we would for any other engineering team, right? So the folks we hire really are peers to the rest of the engineering organization. You know, we can meet folks where they're at when it comes to support. I guess that's something we haven't talked about in terms of productivity. So one thing, we run the engineering help Slack channel. So we do a lot of front end first responder support for folks. So you know, one of the things that you might not think of when you think of developer productivity, like you think about the tools, you think about reducing build times, etc. But it's like unblocking engineers when they're blocked because of an issue is a really important thing that we do. So that's what we use Stack Overflow for as well. But we do run a Slack support channel. But when Catherine Kohler, our director, joined, and she looked around and sort of took the lay of the land and noticed how much time we spend on support and how demanding it is, we realized, you know, we really had to do something about that. And so it's a real yo-dog, I heard you like productivity engineers situation, because we're hiring productivity engineers for our productivity engineers. So we're building an engineering support organization, which will be it'll be rolled out to us first, but we're going to use it as a model for the rest of the platform. So this will be tier 1 and tier 2 support engineers, just to help us deal with Netflix's scale. We're just so much bigger than we used to be. We just can't have senior software engineers sitting like on a Stack chat channel on a rotation doing frontline support, because it just doesn't scale. It's like really, really tricky to juggle. I think my team, for instance, like my team of 4, we would have had like 105 days a year like on first responder on that channel. And that's like, we all like, I personally really enjoy it. I like that, but it does make it hard to get project work done when you've got this overhead, right? So that's an exciting new thing that's happening. There might be job postings if people want to look. I'm not sure. I think we're still hiring for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And folks, welcome to check that out, right, on the Netflix job boards. I wanted to wrap up in a few minutes, but biggest developer productivity engineering moonshot moving forward. What are your moonshots? You know, what can you share there?
It's experiences. It's what we're calling experiences. So in that organizational structure I mentioned, pretty much every domain has an experience team as well. And so one of the weaknesses of our developer experience to date has been we have a whole bunch of great individual tools that make up what we call the paved road, right? So everything that developer productivity and platform provides, that's the paved road. If you stick to those tools, you're going to have a really good time and have really good support, and hopefully not too many issues. But we've found that like the seams between the tools, the way they integrate, can be those abstractions are pretty leaky, and it's pretty easy to fall through the cracks when you hit a roadblock. And we see this particularly when we're onboarding new folks. The boot camp is an amazing forum. Like, it's even better even than developer interviews for inexperienced folks, because everyone, once you get some experience, the things don't feel as tricky anymore. But when you have new hires who are trying to, one, just deal with starting working for Netflix, because there's a lot, but also learn all of this developer tooling, you really get a feel for where the pain points are. And so another really big success of the last few years is sort of the Edge API folks, and they've essentially built a PaaS-like experience for endpoint developers. So these are UI engineers, and when they're writing the endpoints they're talking to for the device calls, yeah, they can write those in JavaScript, and there's a separate and all of those operational concerns are taken care of for them. And so I expect there'll be more and more of that kind of thing. Experiences will like enable engineers to really focus. And it's not like our DevOps culture is going away. Like you'll still operate. Most teams will still operate their own services, but it feels like more and more of those concerns, particularly like sort of the GraphQL gateway and DGS stuff we're doing, will mean that those concerns are handled for you much more. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And best advice to teams that don't have a developer productivity engineering team or want to start one or trying to get approval to start one, right? Any advice you have for folks that want to get that going, or what can you share?
I would say a couple of things. So one, like this is not like a Bay Area tech thing. Like developer productivity can work everywhere. And I know it's not. I mentioned to you earlier, like you work at Netflix, you get a lot of recruiter emails. Every recruiter email I had recently is developer productivity. Everyone is thinking about developer productivity like this. And so, it's like, it's not just all the cool kids are doing it. Like, really, it isn't like, and it's definitely not like, it's not bad. Like your organization will be more effective if you find the engineers that have the passion for this stuff. Because we're not like, I guess that's one thing I haven't mentioned is like, one thing we're going to talk about in our teams is like, we are not like the other engineers. Like when we find people like us on teams, they're the people we want to go and hire to be on our team, right? Like not everyone's going to care about this. Everyone has their domain expertise. Everyone has their own work to get going, to be going on with, and they just don't want to worry about this stuff. So if you have the people on your team that worry about the build and worry about CI and worry about all these things, there's your productivity engineer. They're the seed engineers for your team to start focusing on that. Because I found in previous jobs, like those folks can get really worn down and kind of not resentful is kind of the wrong word, but like they'll be like, oh, why are you spending so much time on the build? And it's like, well, like actually everyone runs the build dozens of times a day. Like it's kind of important. So I would say look at what what us and others are doing in this space, and think about how you can make it work for your organization, because chances are you're already spending that time. It's just like lots of little slices, lots of little paper cuts all across your organization, and chances are you've got that capacity there already.
Thanks for that advice to folks, and let's go into some questions here. Justin, any interesting stuff that you identified?
We have got so many good questions in here. It's been kind of difficult to filter them down to ones that we'll have time for. But really, thanks everybody for the interaction, and hopefully, I will kind of condense some of these themes so that we can hit them all. One of the first ones: what are some other KPIs that can be used when trying to convince management of the value of developer productivity engineering?
So, commit to deploy is another one we're thinking about, because we are. Predominantly service teams, so like that is a metric we can measure. Like if you're a product team and you're shipping a product to customers, that kind of doesn't work so much. But yeah, commit to deploy is something really that's really useful. But really, like almost all metrics you can track really should focus on the engineer, because the engineer is so much more expensive than just about anything else you do. Like any software you buy, any hardware you run, like your engineering wage bill is going to eclipse that. So usually it's developer effectiveness, how. It's kind of tricky to measure. Like I said, it's kind of tricky to measure developer velocity in a way that is sort of fair and human, and so we really focus on like the tool and the wait times and that kind of thing. But yeah, commit to deploy is a good metric for sort of the friction you can feel like getting out changes.
No, that's a good answer. Thank you. Yeah. Another one here. There's been several questions that kind of match this theme, so I'm going to kind of ask the question in sort of a different way. When thinking about tooling at the IDE performance level, where do you see the difference between looking at things like IDE metrics and the process of productivity engineering, focusing on the tool chain?
I mean, we include the IDE in that experience. So one, because like the IDE is often the delegating to like the tools we provide, but also it's just such a key part of the development experience. Like our developer infrastructure and tools, that's the team I forgot in develop, sorry guys. They do all of our developer infrastructure tools, including JetBrains, the JetBrains products, and we support that too as a JVM ecosystem team. And so that experience is on us too. Like if indexing is slow, if dependency resolution is slow, and that's a problem. Like that's a problem we've had with IntelliJ as of late, and they're currently addressing. So, one of the interview feedbacks is like I refresh my project in the morning and I go and get coffee, and it's like, well, that's nice. Like enjoy your cup of coffee, but if you have to do a dependency update during the day, that's like 5 or 10 minutes you can't really afford. So we focus on that too.
That's excellent. Okay, I think we probably have time for one more here. How do you communicate and get feedback from developers as the productivity engineering team? Do you have regular meetings? Is there an announcement channel? How do you make sure developers are okay with the actions that are being taken, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we've got a whole bunch of channels. Since we've got product management now, like we've got a bunch of really capable folks doing a lot of that outreach for us. We have newsletters. We have Slack channels, like announced channels to communicate with folks. But it can be hard. Yeah, it's kind of hard to reach everyone. So that migration to the build cage I mentioned, one of the reasons why we wanted it to be sort of hands off for folks is because driving those kinds of migrations is really hard. Like we've got 3,600 projects, 900 engineers, like for Java, for Gradle. And so for a team of 4, it's really challenging for us to really move a migration like that. So if we can automate it, we'll take that every time.
Great questions. Thanks for moderating that, Justin. And Danny, thanks for joining. And what was super cool. I mean, questions are still coming in. There's a Gradle community Slack channel.
Yeah, I'll come over to Slack. If you want to create a breakout room, we can just drop in there. I'd be happy to talk to folks. Starting my day here in Australia. So.
Yeah, and it's if you search for it, it's easy to find. Gradle community Slack. We're going to have more of these events coming up. Our next one, we're interviewing the Microsoft Windows productivity engineering team, and interested to see that other side of the world, right? Stepping outside of JVM for a bit, and then we're chatting with the LinkedIn folks, and then we have our next DevProd Eng Showdown with. Which is our game show panel, more fun version of promoting productivity engineering. We have Aubrey from your team and Jesse from Cash App, and some really good folks kind of attending there from Okta and Confluent. And so we'll see you all, and thanks for joining, and stay tuned for more great events from the Gradle team and more of this DevProd Eng Lowdown, kind of meet up. And once again, thanks, Danny. This was awesome. Thanks for sharing to the world like what it takes to do productivity engineering at scale.